The modern period, or modernity, generally refers to a historical phase that began in the early 17th century and continued into the mid to late 20th century. It is characterized by rapid advancements in technology, science, politics, and social structures. One of the most prominent features of modernity is the emphasis on rationalism, individualism, and the rejection of traditional norms in favor of progress and innovation. The beginning of the modern period is often associated with major historical shifts, such as the Enlightenment in the 18th century, the Scientific Revolution in the 16th and 17th centuries, and the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th centuries. These events transformed societies by encouraging scientific thinking, expanding knowledge, and enhancing economic productivity. The Age of Enlightenment, which took place between the 17th and 18th centuries, marked a philosophical movement where thinkers such as John Locke, Immanuel Kant, and Voltaire promoted reason, liberty, and the pursuit of knowledge as fundamental values. During this time, Europe experienced an era of profound political changes. Monarchies were increasingly challenged by democratic ideas, and the nation-state became the dominant political organization. Events like the French Revolution in 1789 signaled the beginning of the end for absolutist monarchies, which ruled with divine authority. Instead, republicanism and democracy, supported by the notion of a social contract, took root. The modern period was also shaped by the American Revolution in 1776, which established a new form of governance based on the principles of individual rights and the separation of powers. Culturally, the modern period saw the rise of novel artistic movements. In the 19th century, Romanticism emerged as a reaction to the Enlightenment's rationalism, celebrating emotion, nature, and individualism. This was followed by Realism and Impressionism in the visual arts, as artists sought to capture the essence of contemporary life. Postmodern period. The postmodern period is a response to the ideas and values of modernity. While modernism sought progress and universal truths, postmodernism, which emerged in the mid-20th century, questioned these assumptions. Postmodernism is skeptical of the grand narratives that shape the modern world, such as scientific objectivity, absolute truth, and the linear progression of history. Instead, postmodern thinkers argue that knowledge and reality are socially constructed and subject to interpretation. Postmodernism gained prominence in the years following the Second World War, particularly in the 1960s and 70s. It is associated with the work of philosophers such as Jean-François Lyotard, Jacques Derrida, and Michel Foucault. These thinkers challenge the traditional notions of power, knowledge, and identity. Lyotard famously declared the end of grand narratives, referring to the decline of overarching, universal theories about history, science, and society. Foucault, meanwhile, explored how power is not just held by institutions but is diffused throughout society, shaping our understanding of truth and reality. In art and architecture, postmodernism rejected the rigid structures of modernism, favoring eclecticism and irony. While modernist architects such as Le Corbusier sought simplicity and function, postmodern architects embraced complexity and contradiction. The work of architects like Robert Venturi and Frank Gehry demonstrates the playful and often paradoxical nature of postmodern design, with its blending of historical references, styles, and materials. Political developments in modern and postmodern periods. Politically, the modern period was dominated by the rise of the nation-state and the spread of democracy, particularly in the 18th and 19th centuries. The French Revolution led to the establishment of the First French Republic in 1792, and similar republican movements emerged throughout Europe and the Americas. The idea of popular sovereignty, rule by the people, became a cornerstone of modern political thought. The postmodern period, however, has seen the questioning of national boundaries and the role of the state. Globalization, which accelerated in the late 20th century, has blurred the lines between nations, as trade, culture, and communication flow more freely across borders. This has led to a rise in supranational organizations like the European Union, founded in 1957, and the United Nations, established in 1945. These institutions challenge the idea of national sovereignty, as they seek to create a more interconnected world. At the same time, postmodernity has brought about a growing skepticism of democracy and traditional political structures. The postmodern critique of power, particularly as outlined by thinkers such as Foucault, emphasizes that power is not simply held by governments but is dispersed throughout society. As a result, movements for social justice, gender equality, and minority rights have gained prominence, challenging the old power structures that dominated the modern period. Economic developments from modernity to postmodernity. Economically, the modern period was marked by the rise of capitalism, driven by the Industrial Revolution. Factories, mass production, and urbanization reshaped economies and societies in the 18th and 19th centuries. Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, laid the foundation for modern economics, advocating for free markets and competition as drivers of wealth and progress. The modern period also saw the rise of imperialism, as European powers expanded their empires to extract resources and wealth from colonies. However, the postmodern period has seen a shift towards what some call a post-industrial economy, where services and information play a larger role than manufacturing. The digital revolution, which began in the late 20th century, has transformed how people work, communicate, and consume. The Internet, which became widely accessible in the 1990s, has enabled the rapid exchange of information and created new forms of commerce, such as e-commerce and digital marketing. In this new economy, knowledge and creativity are often seen as the most valuable commodities. Cultural shifts, modernity and postmodernity. Culturally, modernity celebrated the idea of progress and the belief in human reason. This is reflected in the art, literature, and architecture of the modern period, which often sought to express universal truths and ideals. For instance, the Bauhaus movement in the early 20th century sought to create functional, aesthetically pleasing designs that could be mass-produced, reflecting the modernist belief in progress through technology. Postmodernity, in contrast, is characterized by a rejection of these universal ideals. Instead of seeking one truth, postmodern artists, writers, and thinkers embrace plurality and diversity. In literature, postmodern authors like Thomas Pynchon and Don DeLillo use fragmented narratives, irony, and pastiche to challenge traditional storytelling structures. Similarly, in visual arts, postmodernism is marked by an eclectic mix of styles and influences, often blurring the boundaries between high and low culture. In music, postmodernity is reflected in genres like hip-hop and electronic music, which often sample and remix different styles and cultural references. This mixing of genres and influences is a hallmark of postmodern culture, which refuses to adhere to traditional boundaries. In conclusion, the modern period, beginning in the 17th century, was defined by a belief in progress, reason, and the pursuit of universal truths. It saw the rise of capitalism, democracy, and the nation-state, along with profound cultural and artistic shifts. Postmodernity, which emerged in the mid-20th century, questions these ideas, emphasizing plurality, relativism, and the social construction of reality. The transition from modernity to postmodernity reflects broader changes in society, politics, and culture, as the world moves from an industrial, centralized structure to a more fragmented, digital, and globalized era.